Hello, in this video we are going to speak about the error handlers, and the goal of today is to learn how to use the error handlers in Make and why we are using them for, and what workarounds and what useful things they can give us in our scenarios. So speaking about the errors, in general, if you go to your history of your Make, you will be able to see a statuses of your scenario executions, right? And those that was ended up with the errors will be marked like an error or just a notification. It depends on the type of the error you got here. You have a filter to say select just a warning, success, right, or error. Okay, so the warning actually happens when the scenario was not stopped usually, right? But the system warns you about something, while the error usually informs you that the scenario was stopped, right, for some reason. And that error usually has a description, and this is really important. I can't stress this more than than it is. To read this description. So what you can do also is to go to console in your browser and check the console. Depending on the type of the module and everything, sometimes, as you see here, I don't have anything, but sometimes you might even see the information in a console. Or if you go to the Integromat dev tool, you also may try to find the description of the error as I have in this case, for example, right? So I might be able to get the information such as headers of my request and the response that we got from the module, right? So this more or less also might be useful. And that's actually a response body, which is a little bit different from the one that we have in here, right? So as you see that looks like the raw response that we got from the Google Chrome, the Google Sheet server, the Google API, right? And that not only includes the message which developers put in this thing, because it's also kind of programmable. So when you create a module, you program how to handle the errors, and you literally program what you include into that message, right? So with this, we see that it's not only the text, but it's like it combines for us the code, it combines the resource exhaust, it's like a status, right? And then we have a text, but that might not happen, and this might be not such a great example of the description, right? So you always need to double check and try to find more details as it possible. When you got an error, if the error itself and the description does not give you the clear understanding what exactly happened, right? So I will close this because this is pretty much enough for us to understand what happened, right? And if we go through the text itself, we will see what exactly happened, right? So first of all, this is the first thing that we have here, and I encourage you to just go and find HTTP request codes. Just Google it, and usually the first link that you will see will be the Mozilla org developer page. Maybe Wikipedia also can give us something useful. Yeah, it's not bad at all, like you see in Wikipedia and or in Mozilla, which is more technical. We can find all these codes. So 429 in 99 and 99% means that you reached the quota that was designated to either developer application in general or you as a user, right? In that case, the error literally means that my quota as a user, which connected his Google Chrome account to Make application exhaust. So I literally use the API too much, too extensively, right? So, and this is exactly what it says. So quota exceed the quota metrics, blah, 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 so on and so forth. If you're curious about quotas, you can also go to something like Google Sheet, in this case, API quota. And in many cases, you will see something like this. Okay, so as you see, it's actually increased because it was 100 requests before. So right now it says literally like this. I can do a read request per project, 300 calls, right? So I can do 300 calls per minute per my project. Usually it should be, at least it was before, it was the user quota, not the whole project, because we can't imagine that the whole make application with 1,000 users, right, can handle only 300 requests per call. So that means like if 3 users starts to, I don't know, like add rows, they will exhaust the quota in the whole application, and all users will like got an error automatically. This probably doesn't happen, right? So again, it's just a logic. Even I don't even read it, right? It's just a logic that you also may apply to understand. And then you can go and, deeper and see the like exponential takeoff algorithm, blah, 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 provided stay with the per minute quotas below the no limit number of requests you can take per day. And you can read what exactly this quota means for you, the pricing, for example, and so on and so on. So in some cases, you may just increase your quota and so and so. So that's how works API, but not the make, so we won't go too deep in it. So what we need to understand, this 429 in almost 100%, as we said, cases will mean that we reach the quota. So what it means and how to handle it, this is something that we're going to discuss a bit later, but for now, we kind of finishing the first initial review of how make populate the errors for you and how to read them, right? So also with the additionally to this, we have this number, which previously was called execution ID, now it calls run ID. So as you see, that ID allows you to kind of mark and remember where exactly this issue happened, right? So when you reference it to say, save it for yourself, log it somewhere else, or send it to support, you always refer to particular execution or run URL, right? And that means that URL contains some issue. Okay, and let's go to the scenario itself to understand how we reach that error and how it happens. So what I've done to reach it, literally, I intentionally put like 1,000 repeats. Let's do, say, 3,000 because it's like a bit hard to reach it because it uses relatively slow and allows us to do relatively many requests until we reach this limit. So for me, it was, I believe I used a couple of thousand to reach this quota, because as you see, the Google Sheet works pretty much good, right? Allowing us to do a ton of calls per minute. So what I do here, I'm just getting the cell, but whatever I do is just a read, and this is the each of the thing. It's a request that happens and goes to Google server. We don't see it in here. It's happening, and we will try to reach the limit. And meanwhile, we're going to, so we got it. It didn't took too long. It was actually, and as you see, we're pretty close to what we just read. It's 617, right? So I don't know how long it took for us to execute. We can actually go and see, but for me, it's about a minute maybe or so. So 47 seconds says make, and this matches to a limit that Google set for us. So perfect. And now let's go to help doc, which we will use to handle our errors. Let me see if we have anything related into our description. because sometimes it might be here. No, there is no active URLs here to go to log to, to the manual, but you definitely can do it. So the make manual contains a section dedicated to errors and how to handle them. So I encourage again, you go through it and read it at least quickly, right, to see general things, even though we will learn them right now, but you may just remember that some things may happen. So there are some even tips and tricks on how to produce the error, but this we'll handle later. So what we have here will be the error types, right? So first of all, you have to notice that make produces errors, and these errors have different types. So this is runtime error, and there are some other options that we might get. And depending on this type errors, this also somehow determines on how will work our error handlers that we will use to handle these errors. So as you see, it might be a connection error, right? So it's more or less understandable, and each of them have a description. So again, you can go and read, or at least you can open it when you got the particular issue to understand what exactly happened, but this is pretty much self-explanatory. The connection error means we got an error with a connection. So we didn't have error with a 429 with a connection, because connection was great, we may say, right? We just got a error of processing the data, we may say, right? Or error, the server replied with an error, but it's not connection issue, definitely. So, and you can go and see what exactly might happen. It might be a data error, it might be duplicate data error, invalid access token, which is also kind of not an issue of the connection, but does not allow us to get the data properly. Rate limit error, which actually also might happen, but was not reported in this case. So we can go through further and find our particular thing. So we also see the inconsistency error and other warnings. So this, again, these are different type of errors, and these errors, such as our runtime error, allows us to do some things depending on, again, on the type of the error that we have. And let's go to the tools itself. So we basically have the directives description, I believe it's here. Okay, and these are current type of error handlers that we have in Make. So some of them are super common, like the ignore, right? Some of them might be not common, like commit, but we're going to go over all of them one by one. So we starting with our error here, right? And we're going to apply this these are handlers to our module. So I set this to say 2000 just in case, and we're going to add another module to understand how works our sequence in this case. And for that, I also want to have some additional things. So basically we're going to get a couple more bundles. So for that, I simply can use, I believe, the let's do the iterator. So iterator will give us a couple of bundles, right? So we will simulate the bundles this way to understand how our error handler work. Okay, so for each call that we're going to perform from here, let's make them 2, our module here will be executed, and let's add another set variable to say if our another Google Sheet module will fail. Okay, so let's run this to see what will happen, right? So we have 3 bundles that comes from each of our aggregator, right? So that forms for us kind of some bundle sequence. So for each call, we have 3 bundles, right? And then for each of these bundles, we will trigger all this module sequentially with like 1 call per each. So we assume that module will have an error, and I'm going to apply my ignore handler so you can understand what exactly ignore does for us. So the basic explanation for it will be just ignore the error, okay, but it's not exactly what it does. So description says us that the subsequent modules won't be processed when the subsequent modules are not processed, right? Execution will still be a success. And it says also that if there is unprocessed bundle, scenario execution continues normally, right? So means all bundles that will be produced on our iterator, right? So if we would have, say, 3 bundles here, and that particular bundle will bring us an error, we will definitely, previous will work, this will bring us an error, but this will continue. So the execution won't stop. But if we would have the only module here with the error handler, so we will see the difference. The whole thing will stop. We will do it first, I believe, right? So to see the difference with the bundles and without. So ignore, and let's start with our 2000. So our execution runs for several number of calls, and on about 600 we should expect an error, and then our execution will stop. For that particular thing. So we can open and see, because this is actually also returns us a ton of bundles, right? So we will see how that exactly will work for our execution. Okay, so we almost reached 300, and we need 300 more to get an error to see our ignore. Also, we have different types of error handlers that we will use for it. So to say it at once, like if you need to continue the execution for the following modules, right, we have to use the resume. So none of the modules will allow us to continue the current or following modules. So somewhere here we should have an error. So besides the resume, so ignore will stop our execution in here. So this won't be the bundles that follows that particular module inside this bundle won't be processed. Okay, so sometimes you see that the Google Sheet allows us to run, in my test it was even like 1,000 calls, right? It may be related to a speed that we to speed of the execution that we have. But let's see. Actually, I can run another scenario in parallel to also use our quota a bit. So that will do it definitely faster for us. But somewhere here around 1, probably in 2, we should stop. And then we will run it with the ignore in this way to see how it works. The error handler actually handling thing is like not too easy to to handle sometimes, and it's also, again, as I said, it depends on the type of errors. So I'm trying to produce the real one. If this won't work for us, we can kind of tweak and create some issue manually, just read it. So let's see what we will have on 1200. If that won't work, then we will probably continue with the manual one. Okay, so let's just do another thing, because you see the Google Sheet works relatively reliable for us and doesn't return us an error. So what I usually do to reproduce the error, or like throw the error manually, in this case I just use HTTP, so you can simply take the same make URL that you have and put it with the post request of HTTP module. So that will give you an error. So make a request, and we need to enable evaluation of errors, right? And put it with a post request. So test it out, run, we got an error, and it's actually data error because we send the wrong data, but it should be sufficient for us to test our idea. So again, we have the bundles and we have subsequent modules. Let's just keep this one also, and let's apply our error handler here. So ignore this guy, and we don't need the router. Okay, so the iterator will produce us 3 bundles. So, and we will have to say we set 2 of them, right? So 2 repeats, wonderful. So let's try to run it to see what exactly will happen. Okay, so as you can see, right, none of our bundles pass it through just because as we read in the description, right? So subsequent bundles will be proceeded, right? There is if there is unprocessed bundles, scenario execution continues normally, but they won't proceed for subsequent modules. And this is important to understand, right? So if your issue got an error, then it will stop right here. Scenario will execute properly, right? But subsequent module won't run. So, but that allows us to process other things. So if you got, say, 1,000 records with something, and you do add to some another system, say, right, and one of the records returned you error, that is fine. You skip this record, right, and subsequent module won't work, but your whole scenario, say another 1,000, will process correctly. So what I'm going to do right now, I want to map this to say if, let's see, the get should work for us, maybe not. Let's see. The get also doesn't work, but we can configure it in this way. Super easy. We will just have a router, right, to simulate this one. Okay, so let's assume we have this guy here, right, with even with a sum module to illustrate this, and our subsequent thing will still run. Okay, so as you see here, that produces errors. That errors were handled. The subsequent module doesn't work, but the things from our bundle successfully going through, right? No issue with it. And that's how it works ignore. So it doesn't stop the scenario. It helps us to ignore the error in particular module, but the subsequent modules won't run. So the next one that we have will be resume, right? And resume allows us to literally replace the value that comes from this module and pass our data through. So if I will add the resume, sorry, this was rollback. If I will add my error handler resume, that module literally reads the output that that should produce the module, right? It's a default output, not error one, and literally replaces. So you see our HTTP module should return us header, cookie headers, status code, and data, right, from the server, not this one, because this is the results of our current error. And as you see, error also produces little bit different variables. So resume should return us something, and you can either leave it empty if you just need to skip it and pass it, or you can replace the data. So let's see how this works with a resume. Okay, and as you see, all bundles pass it through like this, returns as an error, but in fact we resume it and we replace it with a nothing because I haven't configured anything. So this just returns an empty kind of thing, right? But that allows us to process following modules and definitely won't stop our thing here. Okay, so that's how it works, resume. And you should remember how that works for us. So we have one more guy, which is break, and break works this way. So to do a break, I will need a webhook because I need to be able to simulate my issue properly. And I will just take a simple scenario with a webhook response. That should be okay. So to say that my webhook response returns us, as we spoke in 429, result, right? Okay, and the URL of it, so we can save it and run it. Okay, so now our scenario we will put on a schedule, just because how works our thing. Let's just keep it as this. Why not? But we will just remove this guy, just to have 3 bundles. This should be, or even one should be okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we got. So we will have 1 bundle of data, and that data will we expect to get results from our webhook in here with the same GET request or POST request, whatever. It will return us 429. Okay, so this will be evaluated as an error, but in this case we're going to use a break to handle our error. So what does a break? And if we go to types of error, right, and incomplete executions, that will explain us a bit what is an incomplete execution and how the break handles it. Okay, so that section of incomplete executions, let's actually save this for now. I will need to enable them actually. So as you see, we have to go over this procedure. So break will save the data until this point for our scenario. Literally that's data that we got from here, say, right? And then we will actually use the value from this one as a variable for our B, okay? And then it will proceed through with the saved data, but it will just try to repeat the module execution from this point. So it will save the data until this point and then will proceed through automatically if it's possible. We will talk about this possibility right now, and these are set up for it. So automatically it will try to proceed automatically with a 3 number of attempts. So means it will do 3 attempts to proceed, and I will set interval 1 minute between these attempts. To save it, scenario literally says us we have to enable incomplete executions, right? And we're going to do it in here, right here. So we have allow to storing incomplete executions. To save it, we do not activate scenario yet, but if you go this way, you see the incomplete execution section. So it's literally, you remember we've spoken about saved data, right, in case of error. So this is exactly a place where it will be saved. So I will do probably a little bit bigger interval to say 3 minutes or 2 minutes. Should be enough for us to see the data saved. And I will run my scenario to say each 5 minutes. So with this one, let's use 3 to not wait too much. So my scenario will be activated, right, on a regular basis, and each 3 minutes it will run scenario again and again and again. So this break and this automatic thing will work only when you run scenario not in manual mode but in automatic, means on schedule. So that's important to remember. It might be webhook schedule, but it should run not manually, right? So I save it, I activate my scenario that runs scenario immediately on a schedule base, so we can go to history and see what exactly happened. So we got an error, right, from our server which returns 429 that was saved in incomplete execution, right? So you see the system saved. So now we have actually 3 attempts, right? How many attempts we said? Was 3 attempts, yeah. And our interval set to 2 minutes. That means my system will take this incomplete execution and will try to resolve it 3 times with the interval of 2 minutes, okay? So we can just try to rerun this, and our scenario actually will show us this in real time, right? So we got 1 execution, so we're waiting for another one that should be run in 2 minutes, so probably in 1 minute already, and we will see this in real time here, this another attempt to solve the issue, right? And we will see the result in here. Okay, so after some time, we back here, so we see additional execution that already happened, right? That was another attempt, and if we will refresh our thing, so we will see that 1 attempt already used, right, to execute the scenario. We actually can jump into the details of this execution. So as you see right now, we not only see the incomplete executions, we actually got a second attempt, or it's actually was second run, because our scenario, you remember, right? So our scenario is scheduled to the 3 minutes. So we did 1 execution, which finished it unsuccessfully and was saved as incomplete execution. And we already performed for that particular incomplete execution 1 attempt. This one didn't have another attempt yet, so we can jump into incomplete execution and see what exactly happened, right? So you see we got 429 and so on and so on. So we can actually run it right from here, okay, to try to resolve it. We got 429 still, okay? And the subsequent data should be here. So and what is interesting, you can also change the data in this execution. So you may say like, okay, go and call, say, Google instead of make, right, to process it. Click OK. This one, right? To click OK and run it. And that was already finished successfully, because you see I can enter a different data here. Okay, so I'm getting a ton of notifications because our thing started to do another thing, another try, right? So we go to incomplete executions. So you see it was resolved, right? Because my attempt that I did with the fixed parameters was successful, right? And that system thinks it was resolved. So we can jump into details and see our records, and that incomplete execution that I performed manually was successful, right? So that's why system thinks it's successful, right? So we can go to original record. This was our error thing in here, right? That's it. So let's go to incomplete one and see another attempt that our second try performed. So what I can do right now, I can just fix my scenario. So this kind of, we pretend that our server or our quota got to normal state, right? Save it, and then our next call that we should perform on a scheduled basis and our incomplete execution thing that system will try to resolve will successfully be finished. So that's, while we're waiting for it, that's how works incomplete executions. So you can just open the saved incomplete execution, see the data in it, fix the data if you want, right, and process it manually to finish this incomplete execution, or you can just wait while system will fix it. What is important to remember that, and this is you will find an article about the incomplete executions here, should be in here. So if that's error types, so some of them, an error occurs, the module try to, okay, so you see, if the error type is connection error, rate limit error, out of space error, module timeout error, incomplete execution, the record with auto retry is stored. So in this case, the system will do the auto retry. But if your error types was data error, so you remember we tried to post with a, say, wrong payload, right, or or not authorize it, and then we got data error. That means that type of issue won't be processed automatically. Okay, so, and this one, invalid configuration and invalid access token, and so these guys won't be processed automatically, and they will stuck in your incomplete execution. So you have to either select all of them and remove them, or process them manually. These two options. So let's actually reload our thing to see our results, because we fixed our server, right, with a 200. The system was able to resolve it manually, or sorry, automatically, right, on the second run, which we can see here, right? And that's actually how, speaking about our data, so you remember we have some value in here, which was value of 1. So that value of 1 was executed in here, even though it doesn't show me when I'm hover, but as you see on our input, B1 cell was taken exactly from here, because I mapped this variable in my module, right? So that's, again, shows you how the system works. On incomplete execution, we take all data that we get upon the module that failed, and we'll try to continue the execution with this data, starting from this module definitely. Okay, so this was about the break. And two of the rest, guys, because we do not have retry yet. It's just with a couple of workarounds that you can use for retry. So one of them will be actually a break, right? We have just these two guys. It's relatively simple to understand what they do, and the logic of their work relatively similar. So similar to ignore. So scenario execution is stopped immediately. Okay, and commit phase started at the module. We skip this for now. The subsequent modules are not processed. So you remember what we got with the ignore, right? In our history, somewhere here. This is resume. Okay, so our ignore, the subsequent module are not running, right? And the scenario marked say successfully executed. So we get successfully executed, that's not marked. Means the commit works exactly in the same way, but what is different in here, it commits the changes. For committing, we need to go a little bit deeper in how the scenario works itself, right? So we have simple and advanced log for it. So before scenario starts, the make does initialization phase, right? So that means the make start initialize each module and check the connections for each module. So like, is everything ready to go? Then we do a start. So that start perform some changes. And this is clearly understandable, should be clearly understandable for you, how these changes made. So we do API call to say Google Sheet, right? And say, Google Sheet, please change this value. And it's definitely understandable that if we send some value to Google Sheet to update, say our row or cell, that will be applied immediately because the API server of Google Sheet receives a command, please go and save this value here, done. So as soon as that perform it here, operation completed, right, for say here, right, we can't revert it back. To revert it back, we literally have to just send another command to, to kind of write previous saved value, which is technically not possible unless we read it before, right? So we can't just say, okay, hey Google, please do Command Z or Control Z. No, doesn't work. So that's why most of the modules that you see are not ACID. So by ACID we mean this. If you Google ACID, so this is type of communication, ACID programming, because there are a lot of ACIDs, right? So ACID programming, and you go to the Wikipedia, you will find the principle of ACID from computer science. So it's atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. So forget this bullshit. But what this means, if you're definitely not a developer or tech, what it literally means that we are able to revert changes for this module. So means the changes that we do happens after some process done. And that process includes the whole Integromat thing. So we have initialization phase, we have literally the cycle that process the data, and after the cycle completed, right, we do the finalization. So we finalize the cycle. Okay, so that means some modules able to kind of keep the data until the finalization phase. So we initialized, we perform some changes, but these changes won't be done until finalization phase. And this is exactly what is commit for. So commit commands us, if something happens, to just commit changes immediately. For understanding of that concept, we have to find some modules, and one of them will be actually our data store, right, that supports this ACID. So ACID usually applicable for either databases, because this is the principle of databases, and you will see these nice purple ACIDs on each module that supports literally ACID. Or ACID also supports by watch modules. But watch modules, as you understand, not the instant triggers, because these are webhooks. This is not related. But watch, right? Watch module, what it does, it literally reads data. it does not save the data. That to understand the ACID for watch, it's really simple. Means it will read, and if something happened, it will just reread it. So this the nature of watch module by default. If something happened, issue happened, that by default won't save it will run and reread the same records once again. Okay, and that's what is ACID below the watch module. For data stores modules, which are also database module, if we go to say most popular will be MySQL. So most of the modules for MySQL, they are also ACID. That means if I have, say, insert row module for my MySQL somewhere here, right? And most of databases supports this, right? So until the whole scenario finishes, right, by default again, my data won't be literally saved in MySQL. So the make will keep it in memory, and during the finalization phase, it will save it. So what does commit in this case? So if something happened, right, so we literally command the make to commit the changes immediately, right? And don't wait to finish whole cycle. And that's where it happens, right? So it will commit the changes similar to ignore module. It will commit the changes upon the error. It won't stop the scenario. It will simply commit the changes, okay? And that's exactly what does a commit. What does a rollback will be completely opposite to it. So as you understand, hopefully right now, the rollback will kind of roll back all changes. So if issue happened, say, then we won't commit the changes that was before it, right? Then we won't commit these changes. We roll back the whole thing. So you then 10 records or whatever records you potentially was about to save before will be rolled back, kind of. And that's nature of commit and rollback modules. Another feature for commit you have here, and module and scenario actually by default set to auto commit. So to not auto commit it, you just need to set it to no. And this is again here you will be able to read about the ACID module, right? So that's the option that we have for commit. So this is important that these two guys should be aligned with the auto commit and commit and rollback triggers. So this is not super popular and not so commonly used, but still you need to remember that this option is applicable for your scenario error handling. Okay, so this was an explanation in general how we work error handlers. So what we need to remember with these error handlers, and what is really important, that we can build literally a huge scenarios using error handlers. So we simply add the modules in here, right? And in case if something happened to say log it or something, right? So we can literally add a row to some Google sheet, right? That potentially then can be read. I can find for you real quick an example of such Google sheet that handled these errors, so you can understand how useful it might be in some cases. So for one of my projects, I got this Google sheet that was saving a ton of records. Okay, so this Google sheet contains a ton of records, and as you see, I got a scenario with a different data in it, and that record potentially saves all the data I need in for different sections of the scenario. So here and there, in scenario, I have my error handlers. And what I do, I include the several error handlers and several Google Sheets, so either breaks usually, right, or ignores, for example, right? And upon error, I do adding row to my Google Sheet to track it. And what I also may do is add, say, email, for example, or Google Sheet, or say Slack message, right, or Telegram, whatever you like. So we can send the message to our moderator, admin, whoever it is, depending on the process, right, to say a subject, and you can add, say, error type and everything. So you can add and hard code because it's your scenario, it won't change, right? So in the content you say scenario, say here, and because it supports HTML, you can even have the live link, say hyperreference equal to something, right? Say scenario, and in my case, say day 8, right? So this will form our live hyperlink, and close the anchor. So this will be live link. So scenario that's finished with the error, say type this, details this, and so on. And then on each error that I got, that thing will send to me a nice email with all details, so I can track it out, right, and see what exactly happened. And also because I able to find my thing to say on by order ID or something, right? As you can see here, say transaction, this is date of transaction, this what happened. So as you see, it's actually like 18, so this how long that Google Sheet works, and it has a ton of records in it, right? And then I can go and see different type of things. So this was very fun, this was this was that, and I can do some research. I can, pull the data, see what exactly was it, why it failed, and so on, so on, so on. So this is advanced logging that you can set up for your business process. And to show you real quick one of the examples which I actually have in Integromat. With the live data, I can quickly show you the several error handlers, and we can talk about the executions use cases. So this is scenario. There are handlers at this particular moment when I record this video. It's May of 2022. Error handlers in the Make and Integromat are the same, and thus they do the same option. They have same options, so it's compatible. Maybe later, and we should have new updates. But for now, we can use this for complete comparison of error handling and usage of it. So this scenario, as you see, most of them I have added the breaks. So some people, and including me, sometimes it's easier to hover these breaks on the module, so you see the clear thing. You don't have extra kind of modules such as in here, right? So it's just up to you how you form it. That's what they do. So in most of the cases, I know that, say, pipe drive may fail, right? So and it's not just because incorrect data, it's just because of the pipe drive server. Same thing actually happens with sometimes with ClickUp. So as you see, I haven't added too many error handlers yet, but I'm probably going to do it. And what you also can do is either use some custom tools, right, or with it, say interval of 1 minute. Or what you can do is get your scenario and update the scenario blueprint to connect the breaks. This also might work. So several options to add the the breaks in bulk. So if we go to more details in here, so say here in the FreshBooks I have a resume, right? And that's why it's just because my FreshBooks, to say in this process I have tasks that created, and part of this task is creation of the invoice. So that is an invoice update, right? Module takes the variables from previous thing to update my invoice. But say my person doesn't want to update invoice and they don't care, but they still need to create a task, and that's exactly what happens, right? So even if I will get my issue with my invoice update, this is fine, just because my process allows me to, let's say, to not have invoice at all, right? And then that module will definitely fail because I don't have invoice, but will try to update it. So what I do here, I simply skip the invoice update, but I'll allow to continue my thing to work. Same thing happening actually here with these resumes for phone numbers, while here my resume is just empty. So I simply do exactly what we've done in our case in here. I will be able to find the history. So this was another big one, right? So same thing that I did in here, just to pass the data through. No additional configuration. So in this case, I do exactly the same. I'm just allowing the scenario run to continue to run. While in here, I replace my phone numbers with a replacer. So say my data will be provided incorrectly, or say I don't have phone at all. So if this field is empty, it's required, right? So that module fails, and that means all subsequent modules will also fail, which I don't literally need. I just need to run all of them, right? Whatever thing happened with a phone number. So what I do here, I do resume, and I simply return, say, not applicable or not available for my phone number, and that I add in the following module. So same thing I do here, right? They're just different passes. So this couple of only a couple of options of application of the error handlers. Another one that might help you somehow will be this. Okay, and so this is another logic or way to apply error handlers, and you can imagine and create a ton of them. So this is pretty old scenario, but I believe this method literally really should work really well for you, and that's how it works. So as you see here, I have my scenario, right? So that scenario performs some function, some action, right? And most of these modules, in my case, because this is a super important scenario, have that type of options, right? So I ignore the error here, but what I do, it literally checks the email, right? And for me, it's important to check them all the time, consistently, properly. It's like a really important business process. So what I do here, I literally run a backup scenario, okay? And that backup scenario looks like this. So it works super similar to one that I have. It just starts with a webhook, right? So how to configure this little bit different story, I believe you will be able to do it. But if you have watch module, you can use search module with a filter for, let's say, some last 15 minutes, for example, or so. And so you can handle it. I believe in you. But this is the idea for the logic. This is actually second backup. You see the backup number 2, the backup number 1 still have the same structure, right? So they have also error handlers and HTTP modules on each of them. So if my backup 1 will fail on any of these modules, they will trigger another backup scenario, right? And that backup scenario already does the stuff, and if it fails, it will send me the email that my scenario backup number 2 failed. So because Monday, at that time when I created this scenario, it was probably 19, was pretty buggy with the APIs and returned me a ton of errors. So to be honest, after like several months of execution, this backup number 2 scenario messaged me probably once or twice, and in super hard cases. So this is another scenario that uses exactly the same idea. So you see this is the main one, incoming emails, right? So this is incoming email 2 and 3. So also what you may notice here is the Chrome. This just I played with the Chrome, and you can install the it actually does not install even anything. Yeah, it just takes your current Chrome, right? So you can get it. The registration ID. Yeah, so you have to install the Google plugin for it, and then it will just send the push notification to your Chrome. So ton of options of how to use and handle errors. So what you need to remember and know will be definitely how this error handler works. And for the rest, you have your creativity and your use cases. So you're free to build any type of error handling you need to perform the action. So I will also add additional use case to this section when I find something very interesting and useful. So you may just visit this section to find some updates in future. So that's it, guys, and that's it for today for our error handling session. So see you soon, where we'll continue to build our scenarios and learn how to use Make for our business.